public.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody out there that's listening or watching this show. And I appreciate, the people on Facebook that are giving the show attention. I will have my own website soon. We're finishing up that work right now. I have an admin team, and they're working on also SEO work, some ad and promo stuff to get my numbers out to YouTube and Rumble. And I've been trying to do that for some time, and it's not easy anymore. I guess podcasts you have all these other podcasters coming on board, and they got big names. I mean, these people are coming from major networks, and they're taking podcasts. And so, if you're just a little fish in the pond like me, and you're trying to get hooked into things, it's not as easy as having a big name behind you or a network. And I can see that my guest shaking his head. Yes, that's true, and it is true that that they are taking on the podcast and they're capturing a lot of the audience. But there's not too many Joe Rogans out there yet, but they're getting there. That's the thing. It's not that I want to be that way. Of course, this is Dave Emmons, and this is a strange reality show. And we talk about everything from ETs to Bigfoot to cryptids, spiritualism, consciousness, in which is very, it gets very deep. That's the thing behind the curtain of the Wizard of Oz with these ETs and all this paranormal stuff, is the consciousness and how they deal with it and how they work, manipulate us. My guest tonight on The Strange Reality is Artemis Treadwell. As an American experiencer, after meeting paranormal intermediary Tillie, his life looked thousands of let's see, his life took thousands, not looked. I have dim lighting here. Always had that problem.
Oh,
Hear me
yeah.
say, I always had that problem. I don't want to light up too much because my head starts shining so much you can't see the
You become your own star,
yeah,
huh?
right. Yeah, it's that way. So I try to dim the light, but when I do, I kind of mess up my reading here because it's low lighting. And also he uh he goes into unforgettable turns from witnessing Tillie's psychic abilities to bumping into a fairy. That's interesting. Meeting mimics, dark entities, maybe an Egyptian god or two, seeing UFOs and strange planetary behavior, and more. At home, extreme electrical events. I hear you on that. Strange scientific anomalies, apports, yes, and disappearing objects, time glitches, and a Mandela effect are positively common events. Bizarrely, his foray into the deep paranormal has transformed his personality, beliefs, and understanding of psychology, reality, and life in measures and ways no short, if not short of miraculous. His beliefs, he believes that the unknown holds many gifts. If only we can learn, embrace them, and the unique messages who carry them, and those who we're going to hear about. And Tillie Treadwell, one he's going to mention here, as is probably the pillar of what got him all started here. Tillie Treadwell is an American author and experiencer. Her very earliest memories include what seem to be paranormal encounters, and the other side has always played central role in her life. She was co-lead of an exorcist and investigative team with the Catholic Church. Wow, that's neat. Has worked as an independent tarot interpreter, healer, medium, and advisor, and today is an author for Zontar Press, a publishing house run by Tim Swartz of Ancient Aliens. She also writes for Outer Limits magazine, and that's still going. I didn't know that was still going. It's I guess still out there. Outer Limits magazine and the Quad Coalition of Sciences. Notably, later this year, a piece of hers, let's see, a piece of hers, a piece of a piece of here also writes will appear in a new look by the Malcolm Robinson SPI in the UK, and she is currently hard at work on several other book inclusions and some standalone volumes with Zontar Press, At this time, she is taking a break from the spotlight to focus on writing and her new role in the discovery of an unexpected novel treatment option for porphyria, porphia,
Porphyria. Yeah.
porphyria, a rare genetic. That's why it's rare. That's why I don't know about it.
Yeah,
A
right.
rare genetic condition that causes the inability to hear exposure to sunlight, which to bear the exposure, not hear the smoke,
Mhm.
which was born with, which she was born with. Okay, uh, Artemis, you're gonna have to tell me a little bit about where you got started, your introduction into all this. And I know that you said that Tillie, and actually that's my mom's nickname from years ago. She's 97.
Aw.
She's 97 years old right now, and
Oh, good
still
for her.
living. Yeah, but that was her nickname, Tillie. So that kind of rings a bell. But you're saying that Tillie actually is one who got you started in on this and kind of coached you, and she was your advisor through all this. Tell us
Yeah.
how you got started, Artemis.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, my name is Artemaeus. I am married to Tillie Treadwell. And this is about 10 years ago now that all of this started. I would have said at that point that I had a pretty good handle on reality and life and, knew where I was going. And I suppose you could say in retrospect, I was quite full of myself. And upon meeting Tillie, and of course we were both looking for a relationship at the time. We met one another sort of in that sphere. It was funny because we didn't jive very well at first. I was definitely a little bit of a jerk, you could say. And growing up the way that I did in a pretty emotionally bereft family, one could say, more on the narcissistic side. I had definitely taken on a lot of those traits for myself, unfortunately, and didn't really realize how deep I was into that until I met Tillie. And that very first night that we met, she, I mean, the date, as you could say, was not going very well because I wasn't super open to it, even though that sounds strange. But we ended up leaving the bowling alley where we were, and we went to a local mall where we actually had walked around and talked for so long that we got locked into the mall. The mall actually shut down, and apparently none of the security guards even knew that we were in there until we went to go leave and open up the door. And at that point, our cover was blown. But once we left the mall and I went to take her home, she revealed some things to me about myself that I could only describe as a type of soul recognition. Some details that I nobody could have known because I neither told anybody or wrote any of it down. It was only something that I had sort of kept within myself. And like I said, all I can describe it as a kind of soul recognition that she just seemingly plucked from the ether and gave to me. And I think that type of knowing, that type of being seen is something that really appeals to many human beings. And when she was able to do that without any prior knowledge that might have, given her inspiration for that information, I, from that moment, was forever changed just because it blew my perception of what I thought was possible as far as being able to trust another person, being able to pick up on things that seemed extrasensory, a reality, another dimension that I couldn't perceive, but that she obviously was tapping into and was able to give that to me as almost like an instant validation, which for somebody like me at that time, very untrusting, very skeptical person, always trying to find the scientific reason or angle for something that someone might call magic or miracles or,
Well,
or anything like that.
that's a good thing because you have to look at both sides. That's the same way
Mm-hmm.
I am. I
Sure.
I look at everything that happened to me and say, okay, let me try to prove this wrong, or let me try to prove it's this or that. You have to do
Hmm.
that. And
Yeah.
you give us a little background of yourself, Artemis. How about
Hmm.
I said Artemis, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
Artemis.
Artemis. Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
That's an easy mistake to make.
Maybe I've been listening to too many of those Italian movies that were made, back in Jesus' time or whatever they know, or Artemis is the name. But No, tell us a little bit about Tillie and what her
Mhm.
background is a little bit. You gave us a little bit of your background. Tell us her background a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we both came from the same area up in Northeast Ohio, so nothing particularly out of the ordinary in that way. But she had started to do some, I guess, paranormal work as she got into her teens and early 20s. As was mentioned in the bio, she started working with the local Catholic Church and was doing some exorcism work and had also on the side done some life coaching through mediumship and tarot readings to give people, yeah, some ideas on how they might be able to improve their life. And she's been having these paranormal experiences though from a very young age. Had told me about encounters with fairies out in her grandmother's garden, beings that would visit her, usually in the evening hours overnight, speak to her, and I guess give her information that other people, could not perceive or maybe could not see. So
What do
from that very early
yeah,
age.
stop you there. What these fairies look like, Artemaeus?
I mean, that's a good question. For her, she hasn't usually described too many of the fairies to me, other than that they might be what you have heard more generally as, smaller beings like the brownies type. Um, she has talked about some other beings outside of the fairies or fae that take on perhaps more insectoid
Yeah.
type, figures like large mantis people that she's had contact with. Sometimes they almost look more humanoid, but with like large eyes, translucent skin, darker hair, and by translucent, almost like a pearlescent sort of look, very slender. Not quite like the Greys, from what I understand. She's had some encounters with shadow people, so there's not really much look to them outside of just the darker figures. So they don't always present, from what I understand, something that's visual. It may just be more of a telepathic communication and a sort of just presence.
Yeah. Fairies go back thousands of years in ancient Ireland and
Hmm.
UK and
Hmm.
England. Uh, and they've actually, a lot of scientists say they're real. They're dimensional. They come in our dimension.
I
And,
believe it. Yeah.
and they kind of look like, I've seen some pictures and they look kind of like dragonflies, smaller dragonflies. But if you take a good look at them, they'll have a human form to them. And that
Mm-hmm.
just, I don't know if that's trick photography.
Hmm.
There's a lot of misinformation, disinformation going on out there with pictures and things of that nature. So you just have to kind of take it with, a grain of salt or whatever. But
Sure.
but she got involved in a lot of this stuff at a younger age, a
Hmm.
lot before you did, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I hadn't lived a very paranormal life or hadn't had very many experiences prior to meeting her. And of course, over these last 10 years being together, I've had many paranormal experiences across quite a wide range from, oh gosh, thinking about the one experience that I had was rather terrifying, of an individual that was able to manipulate my fear response, which I had absolutely no control over, all the way to, gosh, trying to think of some examples. I mean, electrical disturbances, things that electricians could not even give me a reason for how it could have even happened in the first place, much less that they were seeing it in general when we went to have it addressed professionally.
Yeah, I can actually attest to that. I have
Yeah.
my TV channels change at a certain time in
Mm.
the morning. As soon as I wake up, the channel changes.
Huh.
Yeah, it's we have sleepy time music playing overnight, and then all
Sure.
of a sudden it goes from that channel to the news, and I hear the news, and that wakes me up quick. So
Sure.
so
Yeah, right. It is
whatever's
alarming,
playing,
isn't
yeah,
it?
yes, and apports. You talk about apports. I've had apports
Yes.
throughout my life, like
Yes. Yep.
feathers and things of that nature. Now, what kind of apports have you had? And
Yeah. So two of them that come to mind, and kind of funny stories too, because being married, it's conflict is sort of a typical thing that you have to work through if you're going to have a successful marriage. And one of the ones that I recall specifically was that she had asked me to go bring in a storage bin from the garage full of something that she needed. And I went out to the garage and I did my due diligence. I looked around thoroughly, unlike what some gentlemen might do just to try to excuse themselves from the responsibility. They might say, "Oh yeah, honey, I looked, I didn't find anything. There's nothing out there, Sorry, it's out of my hands," just to maybe claim some kind of ignorance to get themselves out of the chore. But I genuinely looked all over for this bin, and the garage was not a very big space, maybe a 9 by 9 situation. And I went back in, told her, "I'm sorry, I really can't find what you're looking for." And I went to work. And she, within about 15 minutes, she went out to the garage herself and she showed me a photograph. She said, "It's literally right here in front of the door." And I was so shocked by that because there's no way that I could have missed it. You walked straight in the door and it would have been sitting right there. It was a heavy bin, so it's not like, she asks me to grab these things because she can't lift them herself. So, and she's not the kind of person to play that kind of practical joke, I will say. That sort of thing
Yeah.
would drive her nuts.
I can tell you I've gotten in trouble a lot of times with my wife telling her I can't find anything, and then
Exactly.
she
Right.
goes right to it because I think they know where they put things, and she
Sure.
does a lot of organizing. She's good at organizing, and
Hmm.
so I
Hmm.
have to go to her and I say, okay, where did you put this? I
Yeah.
I know it was over here last time, but where
Yeah.
did you put that? Now that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about
No, yeah. And we're
something.
actually the opposite. I'm the one that's very, very organized, and she's got more of that artistic mind where, things are in piles throughout the house, and, that's her idea of organizing. But for me, everything's in a bin, everything's on a shelf, it's behind a cupboard, it's, very, very organized. But this was one of those situations where it literally, you could not have missed it right inside the door. But if that one wasn't as clear, shortly after or before these events happened pretty close to one another. um, we were standing in front of a mirror together in the bathroom, getting ready for something. And very, very close to the mirror, it's the sink, maybe, a foot and a half away from us. We're getting ready, and there's no shelf or anything around this mirror. If I can try to describe this to people, it's just a very plain mirror, and imagine just a bathroom sink counter. And I'm looking straight ahead at the mirror, and right at about, I'd say, chest level, from chest level, a black hair tie just tumbles from like mid mirror onto the sink counter. Neither one of us had been holding one. It's not like we had it in our hair and we're playing around and it fell out of, from behind us, flung from somewhere. It literally fell right in front of me and from a place where it could not have possibly been sitting. And Tilly looked at me. She wanted to know if I saw it or not. And I did indeed actually see it. And she thought, "Oh, well, that's interesting." Just picked up the hair tie and proceeded to go about doing what she was doing. But it was there was no explanation for where it could have come from, and it wasn't even a trick of an eye either, because it was very plainly a solid black hair tie that just tumbled from nowhere. Which for me, no more explanation needed. At that point, I thought that absolutely was an apport, even though it wasn't maybe something like $1 million that we would all love. A hair tie is still something that's definitive proof for me that that is something that can happen.
Let me take you back. I'm going to ask you a question about
Yeah.
you said this person or thing instilled fear in you.
Yes. Yeah. That was a different account.
Was it
Yeah.
a human was it a human being or what did it look like, Artemaeus?
So yeah, so here's the interesting thing. I'll kind of lay it out a little bit for you because I don't have much memory of exactly what this thing looked like. This was in the evening time. I was actually it was probably in a twilight sort of sleep, I think, laying in bed. I'm sitting up in bed, and this is in some kind of a maybe a dream state that I'm in. It's really unclear exactly where my brainwaves were at that point, but I'm sitting up in bed, and there is in this dream state that I'm in, there is a mirror off to my left along the wall. And in reality, we don't have a mirror on the wall. In fact, we avoid mirrors because in general, it's just, I don't know, for me, there's some spooky things that I think can happen as a result of mirrors. Too many things that I've heard about. And honestly, we have the bathroom mirrors, that's it. So in this dream state that I'm in, there's this mirror to my left, and I'm staring straight ahead, and I can see out of my periphery something move within this mirror. And I know that because I'm looking ahead, there's nothing in front of me to indicate that it's reflecting anything from my side of the mirror. and I see it move from my periphery, and I wait a couple of seconds because I know something's not right. And I turn to look, and something very dark, head first, is coming through this mirror. It's a very small mirror, but it's coming head first. And immediately I just start screaming. And I'm not a screamer, like, snakes and spiders and things like that. There's really nothing that bothers me. When I get startled, it's just a, huh, but there is no scream.
Mm.
But for me, this was a absolute guttural terror that just came through, and I screamed without having any ability to stop it. Didn't start it myself. It was almost like when the doctor hits your knee for that reflex, it just came out as this thing was coming through the mirror. And I've got experience with some lucid dreaming. So, what I've been able to do is when I don't like something that's happening in a dream state, I know how to wake myself up. And so I did, because I thought this thing's coming through. It means business. I have no control over this fear response. I need to get out of here. And, I did the thing, closed my eyes in my dream, woke up, look over. Of course, there's no mirror, there's no anything there, but that fear response is still very much alive. And I found out later when I talked to Tillie, she said, there is no way that you could have known. I was talking to someone about this general type of situation, this entity. However, it presents itself to people, it's different for everyone. It masks differently. Um, but you had no idea that I was talking to someone about this individual and the type of fear response that it instills in people. And I didn't know that I was stepping on toes, but you know, I know that it wouldn't have come to me to say something, but it chose you to come through to send this message that it wasn't okay what I was doing. So she did some intermediary negotiations from this other plane, this other reality. And since then, I've had, no problems with this individual. In fact, it's the only, well, one of two, I think, negative paranormal experiences that I've had. The rest of them have been rather, curious, interesting, validating of these alternative realities and what else might be out there. But
Right.
yeah, that I will
Now,
never forget that.
you never had these experiences until you met Tilly, right?
No, no, yeah,
She brought
nothing,
this in.
nothing of
Now,
that nature.
a lot of people ask this question, it's like I do, is when you have, abductions, ETs, and you see ETs and spacecraft, you ask, why me? Now, does Tilly ever tell you why she attracts all this paranormal activity, Artemis?
No, and I'm not sure that she even knows, honestly. I have theories myself, and it really just goes to like physics, vibration, a type of neurodivergence, maybe like genetic differences. And this might explain why it took me the better part of 10 years to understand how to communicate with her, to understand how she thinks so that I could, have a better relationship with her. It has taken
Right.
me that long. But yeah, I do think it's the type of genetic and or neurodivergence and a type of vibration that she naturally exists on that allows her to be more open to perceiving those beings and communicating with them.
That's interesting. And does she ever tell you some of her, I guess, real shocking events that's happened to her, Artemis?
There's really not any, she doesn't talk about anything shocking or even negative because from what I understand, every experience she's talked about, all of them have been very cooperative and pleasant, even with entities that some people might label as evil or demonic and have some kind of a negative connotation to that. She always seems to have what seems to me to be a very valid reason for their behavior, for their mentalities, for really any of their psychology, which is fascinating to me because I had always been used to seeing things from one side of the coin prior to meeting her. I was sort of a narrow-minded person. I didn't realize how narrow-minded I was. Very Dunning-Kruger, if you know what I mean. Um, and and when she would delineate all of this to me, this other side, not only did it teach me empathy, but it did make me realize just how ignorant I was, which was shameful for a while, but it's been a pleasure really to learn these things because it helps me to keep my mind open, and also not just that, but to be a lot less fearful and anxiety ridden, because I think paranormal experiences can do that to people where they don't know what's happening or why. It's just perceived perhaps negatively by them, or even if it's just something that they don't have an explanation for, that automatically seems to trigger the human fear response a lot
Mhm.
of times, maybe not for everybody. But for me, it has really, having this knowledge and this other explanation, this communication with different beings has allowed me to, for lack of a better word, just chill out,
No,
because
does I guess
there's
Tillie don't like much of the limelight, or she would be there with you, right?
right, yeah, yeah. It's she tends to have some difficulty just communicating with the average person, because again, she does think so differently, and that neurodivergence really, I mean, you might be able to liken it to some people who are on the high functioning autistic spectrum, where they have some social difficulties in that way. It's troublesome for them to try to relate to and then communicate to the average person, because of the way most of them go about their linguistics and
Yeah.
vernacular, and it's always, and the low ego content. That's something else that's very important, is that the neurodivergent community might label themselves as having, or at least her in general, lower on the ego content, which makes her way more objective and way more literal with her language, which figures of speech are like, something that as humans we're constantly using, but to the neurodivergent person, or at least to her, very, very confusing, because it's
Yeah,
not
so
literal in any sense.
bottom
It's cultural,
bottom line is she's kind of introverted, I guess you could say. But I must
to
say,
say the least. Yeah.
you're very articulate. I'm listening
Thank
to
you.
you talk, and your wordage and everything. You're very articulate, and maybe this is why you speak through Tilly and to the public, and
Exactly.
make that more obvious. Uh,
Yeah.
that's great. I now Tilly's background with her family. Now, your family you talked about, Tillie's family, were they also paranormally, gifted or whatever, Artemaeus?
No, not to my knowledge. She was the only one that had any of that whatsoever, which kind of in some ways alienates her, pun intended, from from her family. But I mean, she's okay with that, because at this point she understands. She's got a lot more perspective now on, what how she can kind of go about living a fulfilling and meaningful life even without that. It's been tough, but she's getting it.
Okay, you talk about meeting mimics.
Yeah.
These people that are pretending to be somebody else and they're not, Artemaeus?
Yes.
Tell us a
Yes.
little bit about that.
Yeah, so for me, I know that I still have a little bit of that fight or flight response, that natural reaction, the human reaction. If I were, even though I say that I would love to see some of these other entities, that, the mantis people, for example, think it would be awesome. I think that my physiological response might say otherwise, which is why I'm working on trying to, align that within myself. So my mimic experiences, interestingly enough, are all individual beings that mimic Tillie, and they do it usually in that, maybe in the theta, or lower brainwave states for me. So like twilight sleep is usually when all of my activity happens. I think it's
When it
because my
happens,
dopamine,
that's
of course,
when it
starts going
happens.
up.
Yeah, happens to
Yeah,
everybody about that time. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's once when my super grip on reality has started to relax a little bit, and I'm working on that. But yeah, so all of my mimic experiences have to do with them mimicking Tillie, and I know that it's not Tilly because of the behavior and some of the things that happen when when the mimic is mimicking her, because I know at this point very well her behavior, her usual not synchronicities, but idiosyncrasies,
Right.
that when the mimic deviates from that just enough, I'm like, no, wait a minute. And that's usually when, again, I typically wake up, because I know there's that's not right.
Now, you've been together 10 years. Have you had any children, you and Tilly?
No, no, we no kids. We the more we learn and are humbled by just how difficult it is to raise children, the more we realize that that's probably not the wisest and highest path for us.
Okay, just wanted to ask that question. Now,
Yeah.
you talk about dark entities. Are
Mhm.
these ETs? Are these evil demons or whatever, Artemis?
No, so the way that I look at the whole, good versus evil dynamic is that it's really, it's a subjective judgment. So it's whoever's looking at those entity has a judgment about them. but it's not objective reality. It's just your perspective. So, for example, whether you're the wolf or the lamb, you either, think that the wolf is the bad guy, or you understand the wolf has to eat and feed its, babies. So it's not the evil bad guy after all. And that's at this point how I've come to see what people might call dark entities or demonic entities, or, any of those mischievous or what they might call negative entities, is that they are serving a purpose. They are living by their sets of values and belief systems, and or just what might be universal law. I'm not really sure. And I don't ascribe, evil or even good to them. I think they wear the masks that they need to accomplish what it is that they have been invited to do by that human, regardless of whether or not that human is very conscious of what they're inviting. And I think that's a lot of the problem, is that most humans are, and I don't mean this to be condescending, is that they're rather ignorant of what it is that they're actually inviting. Ouija boards, for example, people think that's a fun party trick, but they have no idea what they're actually inviting or what's on the other side. And there's a complete lack of respect in that way. And so, based on one's genetics, their vibration, or what frequency they're on, what they're putting out in that way is what these beings are are keying into, versus what our egos, what we're saying that we're doing and thinking, because that's one thing. It's speaking out of both sides of our mouth there.
Evil feeds on negative energy, that's for sure. And that's why we should stay positive all the time. You talked about also seeing Egyptian gods, or
Mhm.
two of them, or a couple of them. When did that happen? And what are you seeing when you see these Egyptian gods? Are in lucid dreams? Are they coming to you and telling you stuff? And I
Yes,
want to ask you,
that's yeah.
the
Mhm.
question now is, what's going on underneath the pyramids today? Have you heard about that? About that?
No, I haven't
Yeah.
actually. Is there something new that's come out?
Yeah, about a mile and a half down. They got about 10 columns or something, huge columns that go about a mile and a half down. At the bottom, there's some rocks
Wow,
down there. And it's supposed to have a
excellent.
blue water, a little lake or pond down there. And
Hmm.
it's nobody knows for sure what it's all about. But they
Hmm.
did find they said it's about a mile and a half down, maybe less than a mile and a half because they go by meters, whatever. But it's down there pretty far, and they want to put some expeditions and go down there, but they said they're columns. They're big round columns with some kind of a cable wrapped around each column, like it was
Hmm.
some kind of a power plant. And
Sure, yeah.
it was right underneath the Great Pyramid. So
Hmm.
I thought maybe you might, get some information on that. I'm looking for more information on that as it comes, but I
Sure.
guess uh, Dr. Sawas, he's not
Mhm.
going to let him do too much work there, because
Yeah,
he
yeah.
doesn't want
Very
anybody to
protective.
say, yeah, he doesn't want anybody to say that none other than the Egyptians built those complexes.
Mhm.
Period. That's what he thinks. But tell us about
I would
these.
say Dr. Hawass has quite a high ego and is not interested in objective information.
Yeah, yeah. He's actually for his people, the Egyptians. He's
Yes,
saying that the
yes,
knowledge and intelligence come from the Egyptians, but we're finding out more and more now with this big discovery, in which I'm hoping more come out. But I think it's going to be buried by the Egyptian government because they don't
mhm,
want that to come out. I
sure.
think just to my hunch and my guess. But now you said you met Egyptian gods. Now tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about that, Artemis.
Yeah, so again, most of my interaction with the paranormal typically happens in those dream states, because it does seem like I have at least some ability to interact on that particular plane. Clairvoyant also being something that I've experienced there as well. But the interaction that I had was with what I came to understand as Sobek, the crocodile god. Um, I don't know too much about the mythology. In fact, I think it's interesting that this being, this god, decided to show itself to me in that way, because I was only familiar with Hathor, with Anubis, and with Ra, so and Horus, and I did not know of the crocodile god. I know that they have multiple animals, but in this way, I find that whenever I'm being presented with information, it presents information to me that I don't consciously know, so that I can go and validate it, externally with, some kind of research. So in this dream, and the dreams that are channeling, I guess you could say, or being, given information, I remember these dreams, unlike a lot of the other types of dreams happening in REM, which are just maybe, the brain cleaning up some extraneous thoughts, dealing with unfinished business maybe from the day or the weeks or months. But in this case, it was Sobek who came to me. I entered, it was almost a little dodgy. I was walking a street in this dream, and there was this little tiny shop, kind of like where in the movie Gremlins, where, oh gosh, what's his name? Gizmo comes from. You walk into this shop and it's this, little old man, little old Japanese or Chinese man who's, skittering about looking after his wares. And I walked in and immediately he told me to go down the stairs. And so there was this hidden set of stairs and I descended to a basement or even lower than basement level where it opened up into this massive theater and they were screening this film about something about the Egyptian gods on it. And I went in, sat down, and on the screen popped Sobek. And as he was interacting on the screen in the movie, he turned to face me and then came through the screen and walked down the aisle towards me at the back of the theater to deliver this message to me, which actually was tailored to Tillie. And it was detailing guidance on what she should do with apparently some internal deliberations that she had about her own projects, that she had her own spiritual path at that point, that she wasn't in contact with anybody else to have been able to give to her. And I think that was, it was nice at the time for me to be able to give her something, for all the torture that I put her through of years trying to learn her language and come to her level and fix all my own garbage. But in this case, this message was delivered, and the next morning I gave it to her and she said, "Yeah, I've been thinking about this internally for a little while now, and that's exactly what I needed to hear." So it came in the form of Sobek. I'm not really sure why exactly, why this being chose that particular mask. I haven't done any more research on it, but yes, very much was for some reason an Egyptian god.
Yeah, the crocodile god. Since I'm into ETs, and of course I've seen a reptilian. I think of the crocodile god being a reptilian. I actually think that a lot of their, I guess, high priests or whatever were ETs back in the ancient Egyptian times that
Mhm.
helped them learn things. I had a guy kind of argue with me on a comment about my last show, and it wasn't my comment, it was my guest comment, but I was standing behind her, what she said. It was kind of like saying, well, there was ancient people that were very smart, and that's true. I mean,
Mhm.
ancient humans are very smart,
Sure.
but where did they learn that from? Well, I mean,
Right.
where did they?
Right.
Who taught them? And I'm
Right.
thinking that they talk about Anunnaki. I know a lot of people get tired of hearing the Anunnaki back in the time, and it, changed our DNA and did this and that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a grab bag. You just throw it in there. It's okay, Anunnaki, just throw it in. But it's really there's been a lot of different changes in our human culture and our human DNA throughout millions of years on this planet, actually. So,
Yeah.
and so I'm saying that the ancient Egyptians, if they were smart, intelligent people, they were taught by somebody.
Right.
Everybody that gets smart, I mean, you go to college to get smart, but a lot of them come out with different viewpoints anymore. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Exactly.
kind of weird. But it's they're not learning; they're learning ideology instead of learning what they're supposed to learn.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in some ways, you could say that we may be regressing in our ability to critically think at this point. We're not being taught how to think, but more what to think. And
Mhm.
if that's any indicator of a support for what you're saying, that we had to have had some kind of influence from somewhere, because when left to our own devices, at least currently, it doesn't seem like we're going very far.
Mhm. Now, have you measured any energy in the house, like magnetism, any radiation energy in the house? Because you talk about, strange, extreme electrical events and strange
Yeah.
scientific anomalies occurring in your house. Could you tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about that?
Yeah,
Yes?
absolutely. So when let's see, the first and major electrical anomaly that occurred was probably about, oh, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago at this point, where Tilly and I were having an argument. I was not home at the time, but apparently she had been so terribly upset by this argument that shortly afterwards she messaged me to let me know that half of the electrical in the house was not working at all. And so we were renting at the time. So I was able to get in a maintenance call and have an electrician come out pretty quickly after that, because that's a pretty serious deficit. And when the electrician arrived and was diagnosing what was going on exactly, he had called me to say that he had never seen such a strange miswiring of electrical in his entire career. And in fact, he had actually called his supervisor to see if his supervisor could give him any input on how this mismatch could actually happen. And what was happening was that when he tried to operate the oven, a circuit or a light across the house would turn on, and he had no explanation for it. And it took a little bit of creative thinking from his supervisor to even get it fixed from wherever it was. Of course, I'm not, electrically apt in that way, so I don't know how they did it. But just the fact that career electricians had a hard time figuring out how that could have even happened, and then for it to have happened very, very shortly after some emotional upset on Tillie's end while we were having this argument. And that wasn't the only time that something like that had happened. We had another major equipment failure, brand new equipment failure, that the technician said, I have no explanation for why this should have happened. There's no reason for it that I can think of. He replaced the part and everything was fine. Again, also happened after another argument. We've had lights flickering that don't normally flicker. And after a while of these sorts of things happening, we started to figure, okay, maybe we can measure this in some way, see if we're finding the source. And rather than measuring parts of the house or any of the equipment that was maybe going faulty, we bought a voltometer. And what we did was we just kind of, put our thumbs over the sensors, the electrodes, I guess you would call them, the two middle metal pins. And what we found was that on days when we're doing well, we're healthy, we don't have a cold or anything's going on like that, is that Tillie has a negative volt reading, and I have a positive volt reading, a positive output. And I know that humans in general, we usually label ourselves as, energy outputters. We're constantly putting out an electrical signal. That's what your heart's doing all the time. So that makes sense. But for somebody to have the inverse of that, for Tillie to have the inverse of that when she's doing well, is maybe, I don't know, indicating that she's drawing energy instead of putting it out. And it's interesting to note that when she's not well, because we got whatever weird bug, government experiment was going around recently, that when she wasn't feeling well, that energy signature flipped and she went to positive output until she got better and it went back to the negative. And I do kind of the same thing. We've had it where we kind of test if any changes happen when we move closer or farther away from one another. And when she moves closer to me, we do have, I have, what was it? I don't think I have any difference in output. No, I have a difference in output. I actually output more when she comes closer to me, but I don't have any effect on her when she would take the electrodes and measure herself and when I would move, to and from her. So there doesn't seem to be that, same
Yeah,
reciprocation,
a
which is
lot of a lot of
strange.
people have this problem. That's why I wanted to ask you about how
Mm-hmm.
it comes about in your house, because a lot of
Yeah.
people have electrical problems, lights flashing. Even when they walk under a street light, it'll
Yes, that
glit.
happens to us all the time. We actually get the going out or the
Mm.
flicker on. Yeah.
Yeah. I have I have the electricity in my body where I can touch my cell phone, and if I want to take a picture, it won't take a picture for me. I have to hand it to my wife, and
Oh wow.
she can take it. That's from being introduced to extraterrestrials and this type of thing, and you're introduced to paranormal, in which I think a lot of this could be extraterrestrial. Let's see how far we go on this with it. You have seen UFOs and strange planetary behavior. Could you tell
Mm.
us a little bit about that, Artemaeus?
Yeah, sure. So we, for a period of time, we were living out in the country, and it was regular for us to go outside and look at the stars, have a bonfire, and just enjoy nature. And one evening we were out, we noticed, looking up at the moon. I have this app on my phone where I can, point it up to the sky, and it'll show me where, the position of all the stars and the planets are supposedly. And so we noticed we had the moon, and then we had a very, very bright star, and I wasn't sure which one it was. So I, pointed up and, oh, okay, it's Venus or so we thought. As we watched it, we literally watched it move very, very slowly. It went from near the moon, its position near the moon, and then went down towards the horizon, which, okay, maybe it was something I thought that some sort of explanation, maybe a plane, maybe I don't know. But what then did not make any sense was that it moved back up to its original position. And this was over the course of about 2 hours, I would say. And it was very slow. It also didn't seem to be super consistent, but noticeable definitely over that 2 hour course. It almost like, again, not a steady movement, but sometimes quicker than others, not super fast, but in 2 hour time to notice that they go near the moon all the way near to the horizon and then back up again, very strange. And in that same exact evening, I had this rod of light. And I when I say light, I've not actually seen a type of light here that I think properly describes it, because it had this type of richness and depth to it, but it was white, but not a clear white. And when I say it had a feeling of sentience, when sometimes when people in the neurodivergent community will say that a sound has a smell, they have that synesthesia going on. In this moment, I kind of had that feeling about this rod of light. It was only about a foot and a half tall, and it was sitting in the woods, floating in midair about, head height, I would say. And when I noticed it, it seemed like it noticed me. And it very, very slowly just kind of panned behind a small shed that was sitting on the property where we were. And there wasn't any way that that could have been a car headlight, somebody's flashlight, or anything. Because again, it was this long, thin rod that I swear had sentience, that it just kind of dropped in my brain and just kind of not disappeared, but hid behind the shed, like, hey, I don't really want to be seen, I just want to watch you. If that's cool, I'm cool. And I didn't want to go over and take a look, of course, because this is in the dark, and beyond the bonfire light is not really where humans in all of their history have ever known to want to explore. You take a torch with you. Beyond the bonfires, where all of those stories come from. And
Mhm.
I wasn't really interested in finding out. But I did notice in that same evening both that supposed planetary movement and that rod of light happen, and that was enough for me.
Yeah, have you seen a UFO, like a flying saucer or cigar shape or anything like that in the sky, Artemis?
I have not seen that shape, but I have seen a triangular shape,
Mhm.
um, and one that wasn't it wasn't like the dark, maybe like the government uh, types of.
The BR3, whatever that is.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. It wasn't anything like that. It had almost like the ability to take on its surrounding sky type color, basically. So
Okay.
like a cloaking kind of situation. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I I think that when you get around to it, I've asked a lot of experts, a lot of PhDs, NASA scientists. I ask them what's the difference between a ghost, paranormal activity, an angel, and an ET, and interdimensional entities. And they say there's not much of a difference because they're coming from outside of our dimension and they're
Yes.
coming in. And is that what you think also, Artemis? That everything
Yeah.
that you're experiencing is coming outside of our dimension and it's not here on this planet?
And in some cases, I do. I do think there's a bleeding, and it is an interdimensional situation where it is a bleeding of those maybe quantum timelines, but also quantum realities, where we get peeks and glimpses of those other realities. And it may be on purpose. It may just be sort of an accidental situation. It's kind of hard to tell, and probably individual for each person. But yeah, I'm not sure that I subscribe to the intergalactic situation. I think it is definitely more interdimensional.
You know, that's what the government said. Representative Luna here about a month ago, she
Mm.
said that with all their people that come to them and tell them things, that they think it's interdimensional beings.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me based on, so like if I can relate it to another story, I had done about 3 years ago, I did an ayahuasca ceremony. I'm not sure if you're familiar with ayahuasca or any of
Heard of it?
the,
Heard of that?
yeah.
It's Indian,
So
right?
if
Native
if
American. Yeah.
Yeah, so South American, yeah, it belongs to a class of psychedelics. Its
Okay.
major psychoactive ingredient is DMT, and so it has different effects than like psilocybin or LSD or anything like that. But the experiences that I had under that, and from what I understand, DMT does to things like the default mode network within the brain, where we're operating as maybe the average human being from day to day within that level of perception, that when you take those types of psychedelics, it removes your filter, so to speak, and you are able to interact with some of these different dimensions and the beings that are coming from those different dimensions. So I mean, I believe they're all around all the time. We're just wearing, the
Mhm.
blinders essentially, which would be the default mode network, and maybe to some degree some of our genetics that disallows our ability to see and communicate with those individuals. So yeah,
Have you seen any of these entities around you, Artemis? And
um,
what do they look like?
yeah, yeah,
Extraterrestrial?
I think for me, and up until this point, I mean, I still work on mindfulness and meditation techniques to try to pry away that default mode network, peel it away little by little, because I think for me, and in my entire life, have been very, very much entrenched in what some people might call the matrix. So I'm trying to work my way back out of that, and that's why it's really only in the dream states that I get experience with any of these things. The only one that I have seen outside of a dream state was just the little brownie, a little sprite, basically. I was working one day in somebody's home, and I happened to look over and see just next to the couch, down by the foot, and the thing must have only been about, I don't know, maybe 10 inches tall. And when I saw it, it saw me and ducked underneath the couch. And I didn't get, any kind of negative feeling. It was just more of a curious watching me sort of situation, kind of cute actually. But yeah, that's really the only waking being experience that I have. Everything else that I've had has been within a dream state when that default mode network's offline, or to some degree, my ayahuasca experience. I still did not have very many being experiences there. Again, my ego was still so terribly strong there. I was preoccupied dealing with it that yeah, I have not. But Tillie, on the
Do
other
you
hand,
work on
lots.
meditation? You or Tillie, Artemis, do you work on meditation to try to improve your insight of what's going on?
Yeah, I have to work on meditation very conscientiously.
Mhm.
Tillie, actually, as part of her neurodivergence, she naturally exists in a state of meditation. So where we might find it precious few moments where our brain is empty, clear, not having, monkey mind a million miles an hour trying to think of, any number of things, just trying to make it empty, she can exist in that state just naturally, like a blank slate all the time. And she finds that at this point terribly boring. And so she's always trying to find things to keep herself occupied and stimulated to, learn more, grow more. Because again, I think that that meditative state that she naturally exists in is what allows her that sort of communication. She doesn't have that high ego, and is encumbered by that default mode network that makes that sort of communication and perception difficult. So I have to work on it very, very hard. She does not.
Yeah, you two have a real, I guess, different relationship. It's
Yeah, yeah,
like yin and yang. I mean,
very much
you
so.
have the
Night and
positive
day.
and she has the negative forces. You
Yes.
mentioned Matrix a while ago. What's your belief
Mhm.
about that? And you also talk about time glitches. Could you tell us what you've experienced there, Artemis?
Yeah. So I guess let's talk about the Matrix situation first. I personally do not believe that we are existing in some sort of computer generated world, as an energy source or entertainment source for some other set of beings. I think we are creating the reality that we are in. And I think that we have created it before we came here with whatever sole intention that we had, that this, earth reality, this dimension that we are living in, that we're talking in now, is really just meant for a type of experiential playground for, growth, or maybe even just to have fun, experience something. So I think if there is a prison or a matrix, some kind of something like that, an encapsulation, we have created it with purpose. and that we also have the ability to expand outside of that should we wish to some degree. You know, we can't just pick up and fly like we want to. There are rules, but
No,
um,
okay. Do you believe in your spirit that goes to another dimension or goes to heaven, as they say in the Bible, in the good old days, when we practice that quite a bit? Artemis, do you think that we go to heaven, or is there a hell? And what is your thoughts on that?
yeah, I don't think there is either. I don't think there is either heaven or hell. They are simply a set of rules and perceptions that are created for a particular experience. And I say that I'll give you also something else that I personally believe in. This is my personal spirituality. Of course, nobody else has to subscribe to it. But there was a philosopher named Alan Watts who
Mhm.
said that if you imagined that you were a piece of God or that you were God and you could do or be or have anything you wanted at any time, that after some time, perhaps an eternity, might become not as stimulating. So you might look for constraining factors that would make that experience more challenging, more interesting. And in that way, then, if you could put yourself into a scenario where you were constrained by certain rules and limitations, and that there was a particular story that you were meant to live out at that time, that things were out of your control to some degree, that would lend to more interest. And that is sort of where I believe we are, is that this is a very temporary situation that we're living in this reality, and that once we leave here, it's on to the next thing that we have determined is going to be part of our soul growth, whatever story that is. Whether it's languishing in hell for some time, whatever that idea of hell might be. Some people call this place hell. Some people call this place heaven on earth. It's again, it's just a matter of perception.
You don't
And
experience pain, you don't know what enjoyment is. That's
precisely,
the thing.
yes, yeah.
We talked about also time glitches. Have you had time glitches?
Yeah, my time glitches tend to be more of a slowing down of time rather than things speeding up and having several hours pass where nothing, or rather you think it was just the blink of an eye, but it's actually been quite some time. Um, and it's more of I'll look at the clock and I'll see it's a particular time. Okay, and then I know that it's been anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes and it's only moved maybe 3 minutes. I've had that happen a couple of times. It seems like people, I don't know if anybody else has had that experience where time's been very slow, but I hear a lot about, losing time for
Yes.
people. So,
There's a lot
so
of people who talk about time glitches, and that's why I saw this on your list here, and I wanted to ask you about it because a lot of people talk about time glitches. They talk about Apports, and they talk about electrical power and this type of thing. And I've had time glitches, and I've had, of course, all these little electrical voodoo things that happen to you,
mhm,
whatever.
mhm.
But also, you mentioned the Mandela effect. Could you explain that to people, Artemaeus,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
tell us how you're associated with that?
Yeah, so from what I understand, the Mandela effect got its name from Nelson Mandela, and people started noting that there were a large number of people who remembered him dying in prison, and then a large number of people that remembered him dying from something else at a much older age after he had been released. And having these two very distinctly different memories in large groups of the population led people to maybe postulate or theorize that, again, there are multiple dimensions of reality going on, and that some people are living in one, others in another, and that occasionally they commingle and people are able to compare these experiences and note that there's a difference. And I largely was very skeptical of this at first because I thought, I know from my particular academic background that human memory is usually incredibly flawed, and that this is what makes criminal justice proceedings kind of difficult. And so I thought, this is just people misremembering some particular detail. These are small things, maybe. I mean, of course, somebody dying in prison versus not many years later is not exactly a small detail, but still, I just kind of washed it away because it was not something that I had ever experienced until I had my own experience where I remembered seeing this like signage for major businesses like Chick-fil-A, for example. A lot of people will say that they remember it being spelled a certain way, the signage looking a particular way. And I had this very same experience where I knew for years, because I loved Chick-fil-A, that I knew how it was spelled. And one day it was not spelled that way at all. And all the signage on every building that I'd seen was changed. And then I, get online, start looking, people are experiencing some of that same thing, and then discover this whole, Tillie had been talking to me about Mandela for a while because she has many experiences. Her memory, I would say, is much sharper and more accurate than my own, even, which makes sense to me with the neurodivergence. But I didn't really lend a ton of credence to it again until, I've experienced it for myself with just that particular. I know it sounds maybe kind of silly that it was a fast food chain and their signage and the spelling of it, but this is something that people have, ranging from animals that never existed to suddenly existing, and the spellings of things, or even just the way that historical events occurred at all, which again, for me, I'm still jury's out a little bit on that unless you know for sure. So,
Yeah, it harkens me back to the age of the Tartarians, the ones who built
yeah.
all these structures for these world fairs, and then they tore them down, and then they were
Hmm.
gone. And there was actually Tartarians in, I guess, Eastern Europe. There was a
Hmm.
country there, and that's where they originated. But what happened to all these people? And what is that a time glitch? They come in and they left, and were they really human workers, or were they giants, or what were they? And also, the history we know is not really true to what we know it as. I think you were kind of looking at that a little bit,
Right, right.
and things just aren't this are what we think. Now, in judging all this, the paranormal and the extraterrestrial, I think it all mixes together because a lot of people have paranormal activity after they have a sighting or even an abduction. I have little paranormal things that happen in this house, so things that go on and that, that it happens. I don't know. We can't see. We're not built to see these different
Right,
views,
right.
like you were talking about. They're right
Mhm.
around us, and you were talking about, being watched. Well, I think we're being watched quite a bit by
No,
different
sure.
dimensions,
Yeah, absolutely.
you
Hmm.
know. And what could you tell people from your experiences and from Tillie's experiences? And you two live a really a dynamic life.
It
It's
is, yeah.
kind of it's kind of a it's a I've never interviewed somebody that has the two people that have the yin and the yang and the negative and positive, and
Sure.
that's something that you two should work on and actually write a book or come up with some kind of solution to all these things like the
Yeah.
paranormal and time slips and all this. You ever thought about doing that, writing a book, Artemis?
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually right now working on fleshing out some workshops for people with that channel that you were talking about earlier in our discussion, to help people navigate that, actually specifically
Yeah, you
to
have yeah
become.
yeah you have a promo on Facebook on that. It's Ascension TV.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you. Yep, yep. That's that. We are going to be hoping to talk. We're right now in, like I said, the rough draft stages, but we are working with them towards potentially putting out workshops on this exact thing, helping people to understand the paranormal experiences, because it's for us, it's not just about talking about having the experience and okay, this is what it's been like, and because we do need to all relate to one another on that level and kind of come to some sort of an understanding of what it is that we're perceiving, put sort of some names to it perhaps. But then what do we do beyond that? What do we do to what's our role in all of this? How are we affecting these experiences? How are we potentially affecting these other beings? What responsibilities do we have? What control do we have in maybe upping our own vibration and frequency to weed out some of these maybe less savory paranormal experiences, and have better relationships with paranormal entities or other beings, or um, other types of, yeah, other types of individuals.
yeah, that's interesting. Bringing up that Ascension TV, I'd be interested in taking a look at what you guys are doing, especially you and Tilly together. That would be
Mhm.
fascinating. That would be
Yeah,
great, and see
thank you.
how you two how you two mix together, and that'd be something else. I wanted to ask you. A lot of people like to say, "Can we call upon these paranormal activities to come to us?" It's just like a lot of people in the CE5 group,
Yes,
Dr.
yes,
Greer, they want to call
yes.
these UFOs to
Yep,
them.
yep.
Can you call
Oh,
these events to you, Artemaeus?
oh yes.
You
Oh
can.
yes, yes.
How do
You
you do it?
absolutely can.
A lot of people want
Um,
to know how you do it.
yeah, so yeah, sometimes it could be just as simple as that, verbal or in mental invitation to just say, because a lot of people don't realize, like for example, prayer. Some people will say, "Oh, I started praying, and then something actually happened as a result." When they were going about in a situation saying, "Oh gosh, I'm struggling. This is so hard. I wish I had help. I wish I had this. I wish I had that." But until they actually give the formal invite to say, "I would like you, entity, whatever, to come, give me some sort of indication that you're there. I would like some help," just verbalizing that again, either internally or out loud, is enough of an invitation. And it may be that you'll get more activity depending on what your own personal vibration is. What you call in will definitely be determined by that. So if you are not a very introspective and aware person to know what sort of vibration you're on, then you may be calling something towards you that it will be revealing to you precisely where you're at on that vibrational scale. You may not like it, but that is still a personal responsibility that, as part of these workshops, we're kind of going to be teaching people is how to be responsible in that way, how to ask for what it is that you want directly instead of asking for one thing out of one side of your mouth and getting another, because there's this dissonance between what you think you want, what's going on within.
Be
So
careful what you ask for is the
yeah,
old slogan.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Uh, but I wanted to kind of like sum it up by you say, are you academically trained on a lot of this stuff, or
I mean, depends on what you mean by a lot of this stuff. I do have a pretty strong academic background, but it's mostly in um, evolutionary biology and oh gosh, and anthropology.
Mhm. Okay,
So
that was
human behavior and anatomy.
your college years, right?
Yes, yes.
Mhm. Well, you're very articulate, and I enjoy that. You're very straightforward in what you're talking about, and your Ascension classes should be great. Could you tell us how we can get a hold of you, Artemaeus, or to Tillie, on Facebook or wherever you're at?
Yeah, sure. So we have a YouTube channel. That's probably the best place to direct everybody because we're putting out content regularly there. And so we have a channel on YouTube called the Weird Walk Home.
Yeah.
Right now, I've got a series that I'm putting out called the Intermediary Diaries, which talks about all of my experience over the last 10 years, these different things that I've been talking about with you, and then some about what I have learned and my particular transformation over these years, and hopefully how it can be helpful to other people coming from that evolutionary biology and psychology lens.
Okay.
So,
You're also on YouTube, and I can put that down in the narrative when I post this video, which will be it should be a couple of days from now, and I'll send you links to it.
yeah.
Because I find what you're talking about when what's happened to you has happened to a lot of people that I've interviewed. It's
Mhm,
happened to me.
mhm,
Apports things disappear, electrical interferences, little electronic things that happen, glitches in your computers, and all
mhm.
this other thing that can't be explained. And like you, I've had these technicians try to explain what changes the channel on the TV through the cable. And
Mhm.
the three of them, I went to the head office and they couldn't explain it, why the
Wow.
channel changes. They could not. So I look into things like you were talking earlier. You always want to double check everything that
Sure.
happens and research it and find out exactly what's going on. So that's what I do. Even when I have trouble with my car, I have a lot of electrical troubles. About 3 months ago, with my car, just went berserk one night
Mm,
when I started it up, and it flashes everything, warning lights, everything was going off,
mm.
and the car was running a little sluggish. And I got to where I was supposed to go because something told me to drive it. You hear that voice telepathically; it comes to
Yes.
you. It says, "Drive the
Yes.
car, you'll be fine."
Yep.
I drove the
Mhm.
car; it was fine. I take it to the dealership. They run a computerized diagnostic on it, and they couldn't find nothing in the past, nothing in the present, and nothing pending.
Huh.
And
Wow.
I looked around. I said, "That's crazy. That is
Yeah.
crazy," because the car
Yep.
was going berserk,
Crazy.
the
Yeah.
day before. Yeah. So I kind of share with you what you're talking about, and a lot of people do. And I think when you start doing this, with your YouTube and also your TV channel, I think people are going to be interested in what you had to say and helping them with their ascension. And
Thank
you've been listening to Dave Emmons and the Strange Reality and Artemaeus. Thank you very much for being on the show. Artemaeus
you.
Treadwell, and
Treadwell.
so Tillie Treadwell. So,
Mhm.
husband and wife, and they're going to be working together. So look for them on YouTube. You look for them on Facebook and look for them on Ascension TV. And thank you, Artemaeus, and good
Thank
night.
you, Dave. It's been a pleasure.
Strange Reality with Dave Emmons. Thank you very much.